There's a certain sound that pulls you in long before you reach the mouth of this mine. It's not the ring of a pickaxe or the cheerful chatter of miners hauling in another day's pay. No, what you hear is quieter, sharper. The crack of a bowstring in the distance, the whistle of an arrow splitting the air, and then silence. When you round the final bend and see the main entrance for the first time, the smell of iron is thick, not from the ore, but from the blood soaking the dirt. The camp is littered with corpses. Workers lie where they fell, their tools still in their hand. The enemy isn't hiding deep within the tunnels. They're waiting for you just beyond the entrance. Bows drawn, axes ready, gold gleaming in the light. This is Colsega Mine, and it's not just the richest gold deposit in all of Skyrim. It's a place where entering means making a choice. You're either going to clear it, or it's going to clear you. Colsega Mine sits in the Reach, just east of Markarth and perched above the treacherous road to Old Roldan. The area itself already carries the danger of its hold. The rocky terrain makes for perfect ambush spots, and Forsworn patrols often roam nearby. The mine is unmistakable from the road. A weathered wooden bridge spans a narrow gorge leading up to the entrance. Even before you step foot inside, the place feels isolated, almost exposed. Its height gives you a good view of the valley, but it also makes you a perfect target for anyone lying in wait. It's not like the other mines scattered across Skyrim. Iron mines, Corundum mines, even silver mines. They can be dangerous, sure, but they don't carry the reputation that Colsega does. Because everyone knows who holds this mine. The Forsworn. And they are not here to trade. In Skyrim, gold ore is surprisingly rare. For the average smith, the thought of having access to enough gold to forge dozens of rings or amulets is almost mythical. Colsega, however, contains the single largest gold deposit in the province. Over a dozen veins of pure ore tucked into the dark tunnels. That kind of wealth doesn't go unnoticed. Historically, Colsega was worked by miners from Markarth under the authority of the Silverblood family, whose grip on the Reach's resources is practically legendary. But gold, unlike silver, holds a different kind of allure. For the Forsworn, it's not just about wealth, it's about taking something from their enemies. Every ounce of gold they mine here is an ounce stolen from the Nords they despise. By the time you arrive, they've already overrun the place. The miners are dead or fled. The inside is crawling with armed Forsworn who know every corner and choke point. The gold is still here, but it's not yours quite yet. If you're sent to Colsega by Pavo, a miner who escaped the attack, you'll know what to expect. If you find it on your own, you might think it's just another job. Kill a few bandits, clear the place out. But Colsega doesn't fight fair. The first two Forsworn you encounter are perfectly positioned to catch you in crossfire, one with a bow and one with a rushing blade. The mine's narrow entrance means you have no room to dodge, and the clutter of barrels and carts makes movement very tricky. Once inside, the corridors tighten. There's no line of sight, no clean angles, just twisting pathways that force you into close combat. And the Forsworn are nothing if not aggressive. They'll push, they'll flank, and if you're unlucky, you'll be caught in a corner with a Briarheart, swinging a two-handed weapon. Many players underestimate the difficulty here, but Colsega, unlike most small mines, wants you to underestimate it. It wants you to think it's just another skirmish, and then it crushes you. The most dangerous enemy in Colsega is the Forsworn Briarheart, a warrior magically altered to replace his heart with a Haggraven's dark magic. These are not mere men. They are living weapons, faster, stronger, and far more resistant to pain than the average Forsworn fighter. In many ways, the Briarheart is the symbol of Colsega's danger. He doesn't just guard the gold, he stands as a reminder that the Forsworn are not a disorganized rabble. They are coordinated, ritualistic, and willing to twist themselves into monsters for power. The Briarheart fights like he knows the tunnels better than you ever will. He'll use the narrow corridors to his advantage, forcing you to backpedal into other enemies. He doesn't need to rush. You'll come to him eventually. Because the mine's design funnels you into his lair. And when you finally strike him down, you've won the mine, at least until the Forsworn return. Colsega Mine is most famously tied to the quest Clear Colsega Mine, given by Pavo. It's straightforward: kill every Forsworn inside so that the miners can return to work. But here's the thing, the quest changes the mine in a way few locations in Skyrim do. Once you've cleared it, the Forsworn don't immediately respawn. The miners move back in and start working on the gold veins, and the place feels alive again. For a while. Eventually the Forsworn do return, and when they do, it's another bloodbath, undoing everything you fought for. There's no permanent victory here, only temporary reclamation. Colsega Mine is dangerous not because of one battle, but because it's a cycle. No matter who holds it, someone will always want it back. Colsega's location isn't just remote, it's symbolic. Markarth is the stronghold of Nordic rule in the Reach, a city literally carved into Dwemer stone, representing centuries of control over the land the Forsworn believe is rightfully theirs. Colsega sits far enough from the city to be vulnerable. Every day the Forsworn hold it is a day that they defy the authority of Markarth. For the player, this means the mine isn't just a loot spot, it's a front line. You're stepping into a fight that's been going on for generations, and you're not ending it. You're just picking a side for a single battle. And Colsega, it will still remember. Even after you clear the Forsworn, Colsega feels uneasy. The bodies of miners lie where they fell, some still clutching pickaxes, others sprawled on the ground outside. There's no scripted funeral, no burial, their deaths are permanent, their names forgotten. The mine's tunnels are dimly lit, the walls jagged with gold that seem almost to gleam in mockery. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets, until all you hear is the echo of your own footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. It's not just a dangerous place, it's an oppressive one. And when you walk out into the Reach's grey skies, the relief you feel is immediate. You survived. This time. Colsega Mine is one of the best places in Skyrim to mine gold. A dedicated player can walk out with enough ore to smelt dozens of ingots, which can then be turned into jewelry for smithing experience or sold for a tidy profit. This makes it one of the most rewarding and therefore tempting locations in the game. But that temptation is part of the danger. Players often approach it early, thinking they can handle it, only to be quickly overwhelmed. The irony? Many never return after that first failed attempt, leaving the gold and the mine to the Forsworn indefinitely. Colsega doesn't care about your ambition. It buries the greedy just as quickly as it buries the careless. Other dangerous mines exist in Skyrim. Gloombound Mine with its ore stronghold, Blind Cliff Mine infested with hagravens, and Embershard Mine often ambushing early players. But none combine high-value resources with high-risk enemies, quite like Colsega. It's the perfect storm: valuable loot, strong opponents, a location tied to ongoing political conflict, and environmental hazards. Most mines are dangerous once. Colsega is dangerous forever. And unlike mines tucked inside safe holds, Colsega's isolation means that if you fall here, no guards are coming. Colsega Mine isn't the biggest dungeon. It's not the most complex, but it stays with you. Maybe it's the image of the dead miners. Maybe it's the sheer brutality of the Forsworn. Maybe it's the realization that in Skyrim, no amount of gold can keep you safe. Whatever it is, Colsega feels personal. The fight for it is raw and close. The reward is tangible, the cost is steep. It's a place where you don't just measure victory by loot, but by whether you walk out alive. When you leave the mine for the last time, whether it be with Miko at your side, a pack full of gold, or empty-handed and bruised, one thing is certain: you've stepped into a battle older than you. The Forsworn will return, the miners will die, the gold will remain, and the hill will keep its reputation. Because in the end, Colsega isn't just the richest mine in Skyrim, it's also the most dangerous. And it always will be waiting for you. Skyrim is a land built on anticipation. You see a ruin in the distance and imagine ancient secrets hidden beneath its stones. You discover a cave entrance carved into the mountainside and expect danger waiting in the dark. Every location in Skyrim feels like the beginning of a story. Some caves lead to sprawling underground cities. Some contain powerful artifacts. Others hide forgotten lore that expands the entire history of Tamriel. Because of this, players naturally learn to associate caves with reward, discovery, adventure. But every once in a while, Skyrim breaks that expectation. And no location demonstrates that better than Broken Helm Hollow. At first glance, it looks like any other dungeon in the province. A cave entrance carved into the rocky hills south of Riften. A name that sounds dangerous, the promise of bandits, treasure and hidden secrets. But once you step inside, something becomes clear almost immediately. Broken Helm Hollow is not what you expected. In fact, it might be the most underwhelming cave in all of Skyrim. The first strange thing about Broken Helm Hollow is its name. Broken Helm sounds dramatic. It suggests a battlefield, a fallen warrior, or some forgotten tragedy buried beneath a stone. In a game where location names often hint at deeper lore, places like Bleak Falls Barrow or Labyrinthian, players naturally assume there must be a story here. But Broken Helm Hollow never quite delivers on that promise. The cave sits in the hills south of Riften, tucked quietly between forests and rocky outcrops. It's not particularly hidden, but it's also not along the main roads most players travel. You might discover it while wandering through the rift, or you might only visit it after receiving a Radiant quest. Either way, the entrance gives the impression that something meaningful waits inside. But once you enter the cave, that illusion quickly begins to fade. Like many caves in Skyrim, Broken Helm Hollow is occupied by bandits. Bandits are one of the most common enemy types in the game. They fill forts, caves, ruins, and abandoned towers across the province. And while they can be fun to fight, they rarely create memorable experiences on their own. Broken Helm Hollow is no exception. Inside the cave, players encounter a small group of bandits using the location as a hideout. They've built makeshift camps, placed torches along the cave walls, and scattered supplies throughout the tunnels. It's exactly what you would expect from a standard bandit den. There are no unique enemy types, no unusual combat mechanics, no elaborate traps or puzzles. Just a handful of enemies guarding a cave that feels almost identical to dozens of others across Skyrim. And that's where the first sense of disappointment appears. One of the most memorable aspects of Skyrim's best dungeons is mystery. Bleak Falls Barrow introduces ancient Nordic puzzles and dragon lore. Blackreach reveals a massive underground ecosystem. Even smaller caves often hide journals or environmental storytelling that hints at deeper narratives. Broken Helm Hollow lacks almost all of that. There are no elaborate ruins, no lost civilizations, no strange magical experiments hidden in the shadows. The cave is simply just a cave. Its tunnels twist through stone walls that look nearly identical to countless other locations in the game. Its rooms contain crates, bedrolls, and campfires, the standard decorations of a bandit hideout. Nothing about the environment suggests that anything unusual ever happened here. And without that sense of mystery, the cave begins to feel strangely forgettable. Broken Helm Hollow does include one small narrative detail. Inside the cave, players can find a captive prisoner locked in a cage. It's one of the few places he might be. This prisoner is usually part of a Radiant rescue quest, meaning the game randomly selects the location when an NPC asks you to save someone. At first, this might seem like it might add depth to the cave's story. After all, prisoners imply conflict. Conflict suggests narrative, but in practice, the interaction is extremely simple. You unlock the cage, the prisoner thanks you, and then they leave. There's no elaborate dialogue, no dramatic revelation, no hidden twists that changes how you see the location. The rescue happens quickly and quietly, leaving the cave feeling just as ordinary as it was before. To understand why Broken Helm Hollow feels so underwhelming, it helps to look at Skyrim's Radiant quest system. Bethesda designed Skyrim with hundreds of locations that could be used interchangeably for certain quests. Bandit camps, caves, forts. The game randomly assigns these locations to missions like bounty hunts or rescue operations. This system allows Skyrim to generate endless quests, but it also means that some locations were designed primarily as generic quest spaces rather than unique experiences. Broken Helm Hollow fits perfectly into that category. It exists less as a meaningful place in the world and more as a stage where radiant quests can occur. A cave designed for functionality rather than storytelling. Even the physical design of Broken Helm Hollow contributes to its reputation. The cave is relatively small. Its layout is straightforward. Players move through a short series of tunnels before reaching the main chamber where the bandit leader resides. After that, the cave just ends. There are no secret passages, no branching paths, no hidden chambers waiting to be discovered. Compared to Skyrim's more complex dungeons, Broken Helm Hollow feels almost unfinished. Not broken in a technical sense, but broken in the sense that it never evolves beyond its simple design. Another reason the cave feels so underwhelming is its rewards. Skyrim often motivates exploration with unique items or valuable treasure. Players enter dangerous ruins hoping to find powerful weapons, enchanted armor, or rare artifacts. But Broken Helm Hollow offers very little in that regard. The bandit leader carries standard equipment. The chests contain typical loot. Nothing about the rewards feel particularly special, which means that by the time you leave the cave, you may not feel like you've discovered anything meaningful at all. Just another small encounter in a world full of them. Perhaps the biggest problem with Broken Helm Hollow is how easily it disappears from memory. Skyrim is filled with hundreds of locations, and many of them stand out because of something distinctive. A strange puzzle, a dramatic boss fight, a piece of lore that changes how you view the world. Broken Helm Hollow lacks that defining moment. It doesn't surprise you, it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't reveal anything new about Skyrim's history. It simply exists. And in a game as massive as Skyrim, that might be the most dangerous thing a location can do. Because places that don't stand out are the ones players forget entirely. And yet Broken Helm Hollow still teaches us something interesting about Skyrim's design. Even though the cave itself is simple, it contributes to the illusion that Skyrim is a living world. Not every location can be legendary. Not every cave can hide ancient secrets. Some places exist simply because people needed somewhere to live, hide, or survive. From that perspective, Broken Helm Hollow begins to make more sense. It isn't meant to be extraordinary. It's meant to feel like a small temporary shelter used by outlaws trying to avoid the law itself. A minor detail in a much larger world. Broken Helm Hollow may never become one of Skyrim's most famous locations. It doesn't contain ancient magic, it doesn't hide powerful artifacts, and it certainly doesn't challenge the Dragonborn in any meaningful way. But in a strange way, that's what makes it interesting, because it reminds us that Skyrim's world is larger than its biggest moments. For every legendary ruin or epic quest, there are dozens of small places quietly filling the spaces between them. Caves used by bandits, shelters forgotten by history, locations that players enter once and then never think about again. Broken Helm Hollow is one of those places, underwhelming, forgettable, but still part of the vast world that makes Skyrim feel real. And sometimes the most ordinary places reveal just as much about a world as the legendary ones. Skyrim is a land built on myth, power, and conflict. Its mountains are tall, its holds proud, and its ruins ancient. But beneath its snow-covered peaks and stone cities lies a darker world, a world of secret rituals, forgotten gods, and the remnants of people who have never truly let go of their old forbidden faiths. Among these shadowed places, none are quite as unsettling as Wolfskull Cave. Hidden in the cliffs west of Solitude, Wolfskull Cave is more than just another dungeon. It's a wound in the world, a reminder that even the proud and orderly imperial capital is built on something twisted and restless. Inside, necromancers gather, chanting in the dark, their voices echoing through the hollow bones of the earth. Their goal? To bring back Protima Septim, the Wolf Queen of Solitude, a woman so vile, so consumed by ambition and death, that even in death she refused to stay gone. To understand why Wolf Skull Cave is so disturbing, one must first understand the figure whose legacy it preserves. Protima Septim, the Wolf Queen. Protima was not merely an evil ruler. She was a force of nature, a storm in human form. The daughter of Pelagius II and the aunt of the Emperor Uriel Septim III, she manipulated the very empire from within, sowing chaos in pursuit of power. Her reign of influence was one of deceit, war, and black sorcery. Even in death, her name lingered like a curse, whispered through the catacombs of Solitude. The legends say she could speak to the dead. Others claim she fed on their souls. When she finally died, her body was entombed deep beneath Solitude. But her spirit, her will, refused to fade. Centuries later, necromancers sought to bring her back, choosing Wolf Skull Cave as the place of her resurrection. The choice was deliberate. This cave, carved into the bones of an ancient hill, feels alive. The walls breathe, the air hums with magic, and every echo sounds like a whisper. It's a place where death never truly rests. What makes Wolf Skull Cave so unsettling isn't what happens inside, it's where it is. The cave sits just west of Solitude, the capital of Skyrim, a city ruled by imperial authority, guarded by soldiers and seen as a beacon of order and civilization. Yet mere minutes from its gates lies a pit of blasphemy, a necromantic cult openly conducting rituals to resurrect a centuries-old queen of evil. The proximity is disturbing. It suggests that darkness in Skyrim is not distant. It thrives right under the noses of the powerful. While nobles feast in the Blue Palace and merchants trade in Solitude Square, the dead are being awakened in the hills nearby. It's this contrast between civilization and corruption that makes Wolf Skull Cave so haunting. It's not just a place of danger, it's a reminder that Skyrim's peace is fragile, its light barely holding back the shadows. When the Dragonborn enters Wolf Skull Cave during the quest The Man Who Cried Wolf, they find something few players forget. Deep inside, a massive cavern opens, a chasm lit by blue magical fire. Necromancers stand on platforms carved from stone, chanting in unison, their voices weaving through the air like smoke. Lightning crackles, bones rattle, and in the center, above a pit of spectral energy, a ghostly figure begins to form. "Return, O Wolf Queen, return to us," they cry. This is the summoning of Protima, a ritual of resurrection so powerful it shakes the very cave itself. The player witnesses the spectral outline of her spirit, clawing her way back toward the mortal realm, her laugh echoing across the stone walls. Even when the Dragonborn disrupts the ritual, it's too late. The ritual succeeds partially. Protima returns as a restless spirit, her essence scattered across the crypts of Solitude. Unlike many of Skyrim's caves, Wolf Skull Cave feels deliberate. It's not a mine nor a natural tunnel system. It does feel built, as though someone long ago carved it out with intention. The stone is unnaturally smooth in places, and certain chambers bear the marks of old rituals. Torches flicker blue, chains hang from the ceiling, ancient runes faintly glow when light passes over them. It's unclear whether the necromancers chose this cave for its seclusion or because it was already tainted. Some believe it was once a temple to Daedric forces, possibly Molag Bal or Namira. Others think Protima herself may have used it during her lifetime as a site of dark experiments. Whatever the truth, its architecture tells a story. This place was meant for worship, for sacrifice, and for secrecy. The deeper you go, the more it feels like the mountain itself wants to swallow you whole. Wolf Skull Cave is filled with sound, whispers, wind, the hum of necromantic energy. But there's something else, something quieter, yet more disturbing. Presence. When walking through its corridors, players often describe feeling watched. The shadows seem thicker than they should ever be. The chanting doesn't always stop when you defeat the necromancers. Sometimes, even after the ritual ends, faint echoes of her laughter can still be heard. This isn't imagination, it's environmental storytelling. The designers of Skyrim created Wolf Skull Cave to feel haunted. Even without ghosts or monsters, the atmosphere alone creates unease. The lighting is pale and sickly, the geometry is claustrophobic, funneling you ever downward. The air is filled with faint dust motes like ash. It's as if the cave itself resents your presence, as though you are trespassing in a sacred tomb that wants to remain undisturbed. Although the player stops the initial summoning in The Man Who Cried Wolf, Potter's resurrection cannot be undone. Later, during the quest, the Wolf Queen awakened. You must enter her catacombs beneath Solitude to finish what the necromancers began, to destroy what they revived. This narrative thread, however, always leads back to Wolf Skull Cave. It's where it started. It's where the boundary between life and death was first perceived. What's chilling is that even though you cleanse Solitude of Potter's influence, Wolf Skull Cave remains. The necromancers may be dead, but the energy lingers. The torches still burn. The cave never resets to normal wildlife like other dungeons. It remains forever marked as though the ritual carved a scar into the land itself. Wolf Skull Cave is no longer just a location. It's a symptom of something deeper, Skyrim's inability to let go of its past. Why Wolf Skull? The name itself carries weight. Wolves in Nordic mythology are creatures of death and inevitability. They represent the wild, the uncontainable, the devourer of the sun at the end of the world. To add skull to that image creates something doubly grim, a symbol of both savagery and mortality. The Wolf Queen herself embraced that symbol. Her followers often referred to her as the wolf among the sheep, the devourer of kings. In resurrecting her, the necromancers sought to awaken not just her power, but her spirit and her hunger. Thus, Wolf Skull Cave becomes a shrine not just to Pottermore, but to the concept of corruption itself. It's where the civilized world's mask slips, revealing the beast beneath. What truly makes Wolf Skull Cave disturbing is not just its lore, but its psychological weight. It's not filled with jump scares or overwhelming enemies. It's filled with implication. Everything about it suggests desecration. The bones piled high, the blood-stained altars, the ritual chambers echoing with phantom chants. Even when empty, the place feels alive, as though the walls remember the horrors committed within them. Skyrim has many dangerous dungeons, but few feel as morally wrong as Wolf Skull Cave. Here, death isn't just an accident of war or survival, a deliberate perversion of the natural order. That makes it one of the most disturbing locations in all of Skyrim, not because of monsters, but because of human evil. Wolf Skull Cave stands as one of Skyrim's most disturbing locations because it's not about what's alive, it's about what refuses to stay dead. Potter's laughter may have faded, her bones may have crumbled, but her spirit lingers in the darkness. The cave remains silent and waiting, like a wound that never quite closes. Skyrim is full of monsters, bandits and beasts, but only in Wolf Skull Cave does evil feel so human, and that is what makes it truly terrifying. Wolf Skull Cave is not just a place of death. It's a reminder that in Skyrim, some nightmares don't end, they endure. Skyrim is a province of loud locations. Black Reach glows beneath the earth. Sovereign Guard burns in golden myth. The throat of the world scrapes the sky. But some places whisper. This place is one of those. Tucked quietly in the mountains southeast of Helgen, this cave rarely appears in discussions about Skyrim's most mysterious or most dangerous locations. It isn't tied to a Daedric prince, it isn't part of the main quest. It doesn't contain a legendary artifact that players obsess over. And yet, it might be one of the strangest, most overlooked locations in the entire province. Because South Fringe Sanctum is not just a cave, it's a borderland refuge, a political statement, a forgotten experiment in coexistence. And almost nobody goes there. To understand why South Fringe Sanctum is so unexplored, you have to look at where it sits. It's near Helgen, a location players rush through in the opening hours of the game. But after Helgen burns and the tutorial ends, most players never return to that stretch of wilderness, unless a quest demands it. And South Fringe Sanctum never demands anything. There is no radiant bounty sending you there early on, no major faction quest that points you towards it, and no NPC in Riverwood whispers rumours about it. It exists quietly, almost defiantly off the beaten path. Skyrim trains players to follow markers, rumours, and dramatic events. South Fringe Sanctum offers none of those hooks. You only find it if you deliberately explore the mountain ridges and cold edges near the southern border, which means most players never see it at all. And that's exactly what makes it fascinating. When you finally enter this cave, you expect bandits, or Falmer, or vampires. Instead, you find something far stranger. The cave is occupied primarily by hostile mages, conjurers, alchemists, and refugees from the College of Winterhold. These are not typical enemy necromancers chanting in ritual circles. They are mages who have withdrawn from society. Some were expelled from the college, some left voluntarily, some simply don't belong anywhere else. South Fringe Sanctum is not a lair. It's a refuge, more like. Inside, you find makeshift living quarters, alchemy tables, and quiet signs of domestic life. There is an air of seclusion rather than aggression. The inhabitants are defensive, yes, but not inherently malicious. It feels less like a dungeon and more like a hidden community. And that subtle difference makes the cave feel alive in a way most Skyrim locations never attempt. Geographically, South Fringe Sanctum sits near the southern border of Skyrim, close to Cyrodiil. And that matters. Skyrim's civil war rages across the province. The Thalmor hunt Talos worshippers. The College of Winterhold is mistrusted by nearly every hold. Magic itself is viewed with suspicion. Now imagine being a mage during this time. Where do you go? Not to Whiterun, they distrust magic. Not to Windhelm, they distrust outsiders. Not to Markarth, they distrust everyone. So you go south, you go to the mountains, you go somewhere no one will look. South Fringe becomes symbolic of something larger, the quiet exile of knowledge. It's a physical manifestation of how Skyrim pushes its intellectuals and mages to the margins. The province is loud about warriors and gods, but it is suspicious of scholars. And so the scholars disappear into caves. What makes South Fringe Sanctum even stranger is its proximity to Helgen. Helgen is where everything begins. It's the birthplace of the Dragonborn's story, the execution block, Alduin's return, the moment the world changes forever. Players remember Helgen vividly, the burning towers, the collapsing walls, the dragon overhead. And yet, just a short distance into the southern mountains, sits this cave, untouched by spectacle, untouched by destiny. That's the paradox. You start your journey in this region, you escape through its forests, you follow Hadvar or Ralof through its caves, you look back at Helgen's smoking ruins, and then you leave. You never think to climb higher, you never think to search the ridges, you never suspect that just beyond the path of your escape lies a hidden enclave of displaced mages. It's almost poetic. The most dramatic opening in Skyrim happens within the sight of one of its most overlooked sanctuaries. Helgen burns loudly, South Fringe waits quietly. One announces itself with fire and prophecy, the other hides in silence. And somehow, we remember only the flames. Unlike necromancer dens filled with corpses and ritual blood, South Fringe feels subdued. Yes, there are summoned creatures and magical defences. Yes, the inhabitants will attack if provoked. But there's no grand ritual, no Daedric shrine, no apocalyptic experiment unfolding. Instead, it feels like research. The cave contains alchemical ingredients, spell tomes, and study areas. It suggests that these mages are continuing their craft in isolation, refining magic away from political interference. It almost feels peaceful, which makes it deeply unusual. Skyrim rarely portrays magic outside of extremes, either heroic or monstrous. South Fringe Sanctum presents something in between. It's not evil, it's not good, it's simply removed. And that quiet neutrality may be why players overlook it. It doesn't shock, it doesn't terrify, it just exists. South Fringe Sanctum has no major questline attached to it. It only has 1 or 2 artifacts that draws you in, but the most prominent feature of South Fringe is the mage that is trapped within, and her name is Sloveni. It's optional in the purest sense. You don't need to go there to free her. But that optionality reveals something important about Skyrim's design philosophy. Bethesda built a world where not every place revolves around the player. Some places exist independently. The Sanctum does not care whether you discover it. Its inhabitants were surviving before you arrived and would continue to survive if you never came. That gives it an eerie authenticity. In a game where dragons wait for your arrival and Daedric princes single you out as chosen champion, South Fringe Sanctum feels refreshingly indifferent. It doesn't need you, and that makes it feel real. The College of Winterhold presents itself as a bastion of magical study in Skyrim, but it is also exclusive, political, and heavily scrutinised. Some mages are expelled, others leave in frustration. The college's leadership walks a careful line to avoid angering the Jarls. South Fringe Sanctum represents what happens to mages who fall through those cracks. It's not a rebellion against the college, it's what's left over. And that's quietly tragic. These aren't villains plotting conquest. They are displaced scholars trying to continue their work. Somewhere the world won't judge them. In that sense, the cave feels more human than most magical locations in the game. It shows us what magic looks like when stripped of glory. Skyrim is filled with grand ruins and dramatic dungeons, but its most interesting stories are often the ones that don't demand your attention. South Fringe Sanctum doesn't scream, it doesn't glow, it doesn't threaten the world. It simply exists, carved into stone, filled with displaced scholars, sitting quietly at the edge of a province too busy fighting itself to notice. And perhaps that's why it's the most unexplored place in all of Skyrim. Because in a world obsessed with dragons and destiny, the quietest stories are the easiest to miss. But they are often the most revealing. Skyrim's mines are supposed to be a place of work. Simple, practical spaces where people dig, gather resources, and move on. But that's not always what they become. Because beneath the surface, far away from cities and guards, these places are vulnerable, easy to take over, easy to forget. And once something moves in, it rarely leaves. Spiders nest in the dark corners, Falmer carve out entire underground networks, and bandits can turn work sites into hideouts. What was once built for survival slowly becomes something else entirely. Something hostile, something claimed. And the deeper you go, the more it feels like these mines don't belong to Skyrim's people anymore. They belong to whatever got there first and refused to leave. Bile Gulch Mine is one of the clearest examples in Skyrim of how a place designed for simple, practical use can be completely overtaken and redefined by whatever decides to settle inside it, turning something ordinary into something controlled, hostile, and entirely removed from its original purpose. Located in the rocky tundra between Falkreath and Markarth, it doesn't stand out at first glance. It looks like any other mine scattered across the province. A small operation carved out into the landscape, with a few buildings signifying what is infesting there. This place is likely intended for resource gathering, quiet labour and steady output. But the moment you approach it, that expectation immediately starts to fall apart. Because Bile Gulch Mine isn't functioning as a mine anymore. It's a functioning stronghold. And more specifically, it's been claimed by a group of orc bandits who have turned the entire space into something far more structured and territorial than your typical roadside hideout. This isn't a temporary occupation or a loose gathering of enemies. It feels deliberate, reinforced, almost organised in a way that reflects orc stronghold culture, but twisted into something more aggressive and exclusionary. The exterior alone gives that impression. Barricades, watch positions, and a clear sense of control over the surrounding area makes it obvious that this isn't just a place they're hiding. It's a place they're defending. And that distinction is important because it changes how the mine is perceived. It's no longer just a location with enemies in it. It's territory, something that has been taken, reshaped, and now exists under entirely different rules than it was originally built for. Once you move inside, that feeling only intensifies. The mine's layout, like many others in Skyrim, is relatively straightforward, but the presence of the orc bandits transforms how it's experienced. Every corridor feels occupied, every open space feels watched. And the deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that this place has been adapted to support those living within it. There's a sense of permanence to it, as if this isn't just a temporary raid site, but a long-term base of operations. And that permanence is what makes it feel truly infested. Because infestation in this context isn't just about enemies being present, it's about replacement. The original function of the space has been completely overwritten. Whatever mining operation once existed here is irrelevant. The tools, the layout, the structure, all of it has been repurposed to serve something else. And that something else is control. The orc bandits don't just occupy this mine, they define it. Their presence dictates how the space functions, how it's navigated, and how it's perceived. There's no trace of its previous identity left in any meaningful way. And that transformation is what sets it apart from other infested locations. In many mines across Skyrim, you'll see remnants of their original purpose. Miners' belongings, partially used equipments, signs of a recent disruption. In Bile Gulch Mine, that sense of transition is largely gone. It doesn't feel like something that was recently taken over. It feels like something that has already been claimed and settled, with no intention of returning to what it once was. The orc presence also adds a unique layer to this idea, because unlike creatures like Falmer or spiders, who are often portrayed as inherently tied to the environments they inhabit, orcs bring with them a cultural identity. Their strongholds in Skyrim are structured, hierarchical, and bound by specific traditions. Bile Gulch Mine reflects a distorted version of that. It has the structure, the sense of hierarchy, the defensive mindset, but without the legitimacy or recognition of an official stronghold. It's what happens when that culture is removed from its proper context and forced into a space that wasn't meant for it at all. And that creates a kind of tension within the location. It feels organised but not stable, controlled but not really legitimate. Like something that exists on the edge of Skyrim's social structure, acknowledged only as a problem to be dealt with rather than a place to be understood. This ties into the broader idea of infestation as something that exists outside of the accepted systems of the world. Bile Gulch Mine isn't part of any hold's infrastructure. It doesn't contribute resources, doesn't support a settlement, doesn't serve any purpose beyond sustaining those who have taken over it. It's isolated, self-contained, and entirely disconnected from the systems that define the rest of Skyrim. And that isolation reinforces that feeling that this is something that has ultimately slipped through the cracks. A place that once lost is simply written off rather than reclaimed. Solion's Sinkhole is a place where the player ultimately gets surprised by what has overtaken it, feeling like an intrusion from something ancient, something that was already there long before the mine existed, waiting beneath the surface. Located in the Reach just north of Old Roldan Inn, it begins like many other mining operations in the province, a small, functional site carved into the landscape, built with a clear purpose and supported by workers trying to make a living. There's nothing outwardly unusual about it at first. It's modest, grounded, entirely tied to the present. But that sense soon quickly starts to unravel the moment you step inside. Because what defines the sinkhole isn't what the miners built, it's what they uncovered. Unlike other mines that are taken over by bandits or creatures moving in from the outside, this is a case where the danger comes from below, from something buried and undisturbed until the act of mining itself brings it to the surface. The deeper sections of the mine reveal Nordic ruins, and with them the presence of Draga, not as scattered enemies but as a reawakening force tied to the ancient dead. This changes the entire framing of the location. The mine wasn't simply lost or abandoned, it was disrupted. The miners didn't fail to defend it, they accidentally unearthed something they were never meant to find. And once that line was crossed, there was no reclaiming it without confrontation of what had been awakened. What makes this especially effective is how the transition is handled. Much like Darkwater Pass, there isn't a single moment where everything changes. Instead, it's gradual. The mine begins to feel less like a place of work and more like a threshold. Wooden supports and mining equipment give way to stone architecture, carved walls and burial chambers that clearly belong to a much older world. And unlike Falmer tunnels which reshape and adapt, the Nordic ruin beneath Solion's Sinkhole feels preserved, untouched until recently. The Draga aren't building anything new. I don't think they really could anyway. They're reclaiming what was always theirs. And that distinction creates a very different kind of tension. This isn't a place being transformed into something else. It's a place reverting back to what it once was, with the miners' presence reduced to a brief interruption in a much longer timeline. The Draga themselves reinforce this idea through their behaviour and placement. They aren't wandering aimlessly or occupying the mine in a disorganised way. They are positioned within the structure of the ruin, guarding it, moving through it with a sense of purpose that feels tied to something older than the current world. When they spill into the mine's upper sections, it doesn't feel like an expansion. It feels like a spillover, like a coffee that was poured too far over the brim of the mug, as if the boundary between the ancient and the present has been broken. And that's where the real unease comes from, because this place doesn't feel like it's been taken over by external force. It feels like it's been opened up to something that was always there, just waiting beneath the surface, much like the Falmer in Darkwater Pass. This also gives the location a different kind of narrative weight compared to the other overrun mines. In places like Bile Gulch Mine, the transformation is visible and immediate. A group takes control, reshapes the space, and establishes dominance. In Darkwater Pass, the change is environmental and systematic, a slow absorption into something alien. But in Solion's Sinkhole, the change is temporal. It's about layers of history colliding. The mine represents the present, fragile and temporary, while the ruin beneath represents the past, enduring and unyielding. And when those two layers intersect, the result isn't coexistence, it's displacement. The present gives way to the past almost effortlessly. Even the structure of the mine supports this idea. It doesn't feel particularly deep or expansive at first, but once the ruin is revealed, the sense of scale shifts. The space beneath feels older, more significant, as if the mine was only ever scratching the surface of something much larger. And that imbalance makes the upper sections feel small in comparison, almost insignificant. The miners weren't uncovering a resource. They were uncovering a tomb, a piece of history that was never meant to be disturbed. And in doing so, they effectively erased their own claim to the space. The sinkhole ultimately stands out because it doesn't show a mine being lost. It shows how easily the present can be overwritten by the past in Skyrim. It's not about invasion or control, but about rediscovery in the worst possible sense. A reminder that much of the province is built on top of something older, something buried, and that digging too deep doesn't always lead to progress. Sometimes it just uncovers what was meant to stay hidden. And once that happens, the mine itself isn't just dangerous. It's no longer yours at all. Darkwater Pass doesn't feel like a place that was simply taken over. It feels like a place that was consumed slowly and completely, until whatever it used to be no longer mattered. Located near Darkwater Crossing in the Rift, it begins with a sense of being familiar. The entrance suggests a mine, or at least a very functional tunnel carved with purpose, something tied to the surface world and the people who live there. But that sense of normalcy doesn't last long. The deeper you move into Darkwater Pass, the more the environment shifts, not abruptly, but gradually, in a way that feels almost invasive. Wooden supports and man-made structures begin to give way to damp stone, bioluminescent growths, and the unmistakable signs of Falmer presence. It's not just that enemies appear, it's that the space itself begins to change identity. You're not entering a mine with Falmer in it, you're entering a Falmer domain that has absorbed a mine. That distinction is what defines Darkwater Pass, because the Falmer don't just occupy spaces, they reshape them. Their presence isn't surface level or temporary, it's systematic. The tunnels twist in ways that feel less engineered and more organic, as if the original layout has been altered over time to suit something else entirely. Charus nests line the walls, adding another layer of discomfort, not just visually, but conceptually as well. These creatures aren't just companions to the Falmer, they're part of the same ecosystem, reinforcing the idea that what's happening here isn't random. It's established, sustained, and deeply rooted. The further you go, the less it feels like you're exploring a location, and the more it feels like you're descending into something that has been building itself for a long time without interruption. What makes this especially effective is how subtle the transition is, creating a kind of overlap where it becomes difficult to separate what was built by humans and what has been altered by what came after. The blurring of boundaries is what gives Darkwater Pass its unsettling tone. It's not just a place that was lost, it's a place that was overwritten. The original purpose hasn't just been abandoned, it's been erased, replaced by something that doesn't resemble it in any meaningful way. Darkwater Pass doesn't feel temporary, it feels permanent, like whatever claim the surface once had over this space has been completely lost. It doesn't lead somewhere, it traps you within itself, looping you through a space that has no interest in connection back to the world above. It's a dead end in terms of purpose, but a fully realised system in terms of existence. Now that I've said all this, Darkwater Pass isn't technically a mine, and that's worth acknowledging, because on paper it doesn't belong in this category at all. It's a cave, separate from the structured, purpose-built spaces that define Skyrim's mining operations. But its inclusion here comes from something more contextual than literal. Because when you look at where Darkwater Pass is situated, right beside Darkwater Crossing, an active mining community, it starts to feel like an extension of that same industrial footprint. That kind of place that under slightly different circumstances would have been a mine. The geography lines up, the proximity makes sense. It sits close enough to a settlement built entirely around excavation that it's easy to imagine miners eventually pushing in that direction, expanding their operations, turning the cave into something functional. But that never happens, or more accurately, it can't happen, because whatever potential that space had is already gone, claimed long before it could be repurposed. The Falmer and Charles don't just occupy the cave, they preempt its future. They turn what could have been a site of productivity into something inaccessible, something hostile, something completely cut off from the world. And that's why it still fits here, not because it is a mine, but because it exists right on the edge of becoming one. A missed opportunity shaped entirely by what got there first and refused to leave. Infested before miners could find any sort of resources in there. Colsager Mine is another location where a mine being overrun feels less like random occupation and more like a deliberate act of reclamation, turning what should be a place of labour into something deeply tied to the conflict of the Reach itself. Located just east of Markarth, along the river that cuts through the Karth Valley, Colsager isn't some forgotten or insignificant site. It's a gold mine, valuable, productive, and directly tied to the wealth of the region. Or at least it used to be. By the time you arrive, that value hasn't disappeared, but it has been redirected, because the Forsworn who now occupy the mine haven't just stumbled upon it or taken shelter there. They've taken control of something that represents the very forces they oppose. At first glance, the structure of Colsager still reflects its original purpose. The exterior is open, active in design, with smelters, workstations, and clear signs of an organised mining activity. But that quickly gives way to something more hostile. Forsworn patrol the area, not as scattered enemies, but as a group that clearly understands the terrain and has positioned themselves to defend it. There's a sense of awareness to their presence. They aren't just hiding within the mine, they're asserting control over it and the surrounding land. And that control feels intentional in a way that sets Colsager apart from other locations, like Embouchard Mine, where bandits simply take advantage of opportunity. The Forsworn aren't opportunists in the same way. They're ideological. Their presence here carries meaning. That meaning becomes clearer when you consider what Colsager Mine represents within the Reach. The region itself is defined by tension between the Nords who control it and the Forsworn who claim it as their ancestral land. Markarth stands as a symbol of that control, a city built on Dwemer foundations, rich in resources and heavily guarded. The mine, sitting just outside of it, feeds into that same system. It's part of the infrastructure that allows Markarth to thrive. So when the Forsworn take over the mine, it doesn't just disrupt a single location. It disrupts a supply line. It's a direct challenge to the authority that governs the region. Inside the mine, that tension continues to build. The deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that this isn't just a defensive occupation. It's an adaptation of the space itself. The Forsworn don't reshape the mine in the same way Falmer might, nor do they leave it structurally untouched like bandits often do. Instead, there's a blending of identities. The mine's layout remains intact, but its atmosphere shifts. The presence of the Forsworn, with their distinct armour, rituals, and connection to the land, creates a contrast against the industrial nature of this space entirely. It feels like two opposing ideas existing in the same place: extraction versus belonging. The mine was built to take from the land. The Forsworn, in their own way, are trying to reclaim it. This creates a unique kind of discomfort because Colsager Mine doesn't feel like it's being stripped of meaning. It feels like it has been given a different one. The gold is still there, the tunnels still function, but the purpose behind them has changed. It's no longer about production or profit. It's about control, resistance, and presence. The Forsworn aren't mining the gold in any structured sense, but by holding the mine, they're denying it to those who would. And that act alone transforms the space into something political. There's also a noticeable difference in how the location feels compared to the more enclosed or isolated mines. Colsager is relatively open, both outside and its inside sections. Sunlight reaches parts of it. The river runs nearby. It doesn't feel buried or hidden in the same way as other overrun locations. And that openness makes the takeover feel more bold. This isn't something happening in the shadows, it's happening in full view, right on the edge of one of Skyrim's most important cities. The Forsworn aren't concealing their presence, they're making it known. So Colsega Mine isn't just a place that was overrun, it's a place that was contested, taken and temporarily reclaimed, all within the broader struggle of the region it belongs to. It shows how a mine can become more than just a source of resources. It can become a symbol, a point of tension, a piece of land that means different things to different people. And because of that, its transformation feels more significant than a simple occupation. It's not just about who's inside the mine, it's about what the mine represents and who has the power to decide that. Embershard Mine is one of the first locations most players will ever encounter in Skyrim. And because of that, it's easy to overlook just how telling it is as an example of a mine being completely overrun and repurposed into something far removed from its original intent. Located just outside Helgen, along the road towards Riverwood, it sits directly in the path of your escape from the game's opening sequence. In many ways, it's designed to feel like a natural extension of the tutorial. A simple, approachable dungeon meant to introduce players to basic combat and exploration. But when you stop looking at it as a gameplay tool and instead consider what it represents within the world, Embershard Mine becomes something much more interesting. Because this isn't just a convenient early game encounter, it's a fully overtaken workplace sitting in one of the most trafficked areas in Skyrim, operating in plain sight. At a glance, Embershard still resembles what it once was. The structure is intact, the layout is clear, and there are still visible traces of its function as a mine. But almost immediately that illusion starts to break. The people inside aren't miners, they're bandits. They've wasted no time in turning the space into their own operation. Unlike more remote locations where takeovers can feel isolated or hidden, Embershard Mine exists right next to a major road, within walking distance of Riverwood and not far from Helgen itself. And yet, despite that proximity to civilization, it has been completely claimed by a hostile group with little resistance. That alone says a lot about how vulnerable these places are, especially in the aftermath of chaos like Helgen's destruction. Authority weakens and spaces like this are the first to fall. What makes Embershard stand out is how efficiently it has been repurposed. The bandits haven't just occupied the mine, they've adapted it to suit their needs almost seamlessly. Lookouts are positioned outside, keeping watch over the road. Inside, the layout is used strategically, with choke points, elevated positions and traps that suggest a level of awareness about how to defend a space. There's even a sense of routine to their presence. Conversations between bandits hint at a familiar nature, at a group that has settled in rather than just passing through. This isn't a temporary hideout, it's a functional base built on top of something that used to serve a completely different purpose. And yet, unlike places such as Bile Gulch Mine, there's no attempt here to establish identity or permanence beyond survival. The bandits aren't trying to build something new, they're simply using what's already there. The mine's infrastructure remains largely unchanged, but its meaning has shifted entirely. Where there was once labour and production, there is now control and opportunism. The tools, the tunnels, the storage areas, all of it has been recontextualised. The mine still functions in a way, but not for the people it was meant to serve. It's been hollowed out conceptually, its purpose replaced without altering its form. This creates an interesting contrast between appearance and reality. This mine looks familiar, almost mundane, especially compared to more dramatic locations in Skyrim. There are no ancient ruins hidden beneath it, no sprawling underground ecosystems, no overwhelming sense of scale. And because of that, it's easy to dismiss it as significant. But that simplicity is exactly what makes it effective. It shows how quickly and quietly a place can be overtaken without needing to be transformed into something unrecognisable. The change doesn't have to be dramatic to be complete. Sometimes all it takes is a shift in who controls the space. There's also something important about its placement so early in the game. Ember Shard introduces players not just to combat, but to a recurring theme in Skyrim's world. That many of its structures are unstable, constantly shifting between ownership and abandonment. Mines, forts, caves, they don't stay under one group's control for long. They're contested, reclaimed, lost, repurposed over and over again. Ember Shard Mine is simply the first time you see it happen, and because it's framed as a basic encounter, its implications are easy to miss. But in reality, it sets the tone for how the rest of the world has to operate. Even after clearing it, there's a lingering sense that nothing about the situation is permanent. The mine can be reclaimed, yes, but there's no guarantee it will stay that way. Another group could move in just as easily, and that instability is baked into the location, and to be honest, into the world of Skyrim itself. The mine doesn't present a resolved problem, it presents a cycle. In the end, what makes Ember Shard Mine one of the most overrun mines and places in Skyrim isn't the scale of its takeover, but how ordinary it feels. There's no spectacle, no dramatic transformation, no hidden depth, just a straightforward example of how quickly something functional can become something hostile. And because it happens so early, so casually, it almost goes unnoticed. But it really shouldn't, because if a mine this close to civilization can be completely overtaken without much resistance, it raises a larger question about the rest of Skyrim. Not how these places fall, but how many of them were never truly secure to begin with. Mines in Skyrim are meant to be some of the most grounded places in the entire world. They're not ancient ruins or hidden cities, they're simply practical, built for one purpose, to work. But that's exactly what makes them so vulnerable. Because once that structure is broken, once the workers leave or something forces them out, these places don't stay empty for long. They get taken, sometimes by bandits looking for easy shelter, sometimes by something far worse lurking beneath the surface, and sometimes by forces that were already there, just waiting to be uncovered. What you're left with are spaces that feel familiar on the inside, but completely changed within. Not abandoned, but claimed. And across Skyrim, some mines stand out more than others, not for what they produce, but for what's taken over instead.